The first thing the woman did after being reborn was to immediately cancel her husband's household registration, turning him into a dead man on paper for good, all because in her past life, her husband's twin brother drowned in an accident. And after hearing the news, her husband couldn't bear to let his pregnant sister-in-law become a widow, so he decided to assume his brother's identity and take care of her instead. Just because the sister-in-law was a pampered city girl who couldn't handle the gossip of villagers, and the woman was just an ordinary wife from the countryside. In their eyes, even if her husband died, she could still survive. But at that time the woman was drowning in grief. She buried her husband in a rush without checking carefully. The very next day after the funeral, her husband took over her entire dowry under his brother's name, and then drove her and her daughter out of the house. To support her child, the woman worked tirelessly doing manual labor, but fate didn't spare her. Years later, a sudden snowstorm left mother and daughter frozen to death on the street. It wasn't until the end of her life that she learned from neighbors that it was actually the brother who drowned that year. And at that moment, her husband was happily eating New Year's dinner with the sister-in-law's family. Looking at her shameless husband, the woman swore that if she had another chance she would make him pay. When she opened her eyes again, she had returned to the day her brother-in-law drowned 3 years ago. At that moment her husband was secretly discussing impersonation with his parents. Only after hearing their conversation did she realize that in her past life the in-laws were fully aware of the deception. She and her innocent daughter were the only ones kept in the dark. With the painful lesson from her past, the woman immediately rushed home to check her dowry. In her previous life her husband had taken it while she was unconscious from grief. When she woke up, she saw her sister-in-law wearing her jewelry, and feeling guilty, her husband had kicked her and her daughter out of the house. Now that fate had given her another chance, she swore to bring her husband to ruin. She then snuck away to town while her in-laws were distracted, first sending a telegram to her brother for help, then heading straight to the local authorities, and cancelled her husband's household registration. From that moment on, the woman officially became a widow. Since her husband liked impersonating his brother so much, she wanted to see how he would explain himself when the authorities came knocking. The woman returned home, but as soon as she stepped inside, she saw her sister-in-law verbally abusing her daughter, and her husband stood by watching with a smile. Seeing the disgust on the sister-in-law's face, the woman quickly came up with a plan. She dropped to her knees in front of her in-laws, and announced that since her husband was now dead, to lessen their burden, she would take her daughter and return to her parents' home tomorrow. Her husband and in-laws instantly changed their expressions. They all spoke at once, trying to stop her from leaving. Her husband's eyes were full of rage, as if she had committed a terrible crime, because in his heart, even if he died, the woman should still stay and serve his family. The sister-in-law misunderstood, thinking the family couldn't bear to part with the woman, and ran out crying. Her husband immediately chased after her in a panic. As the in-laws kept begging her to stay, the woman sneered in her heart. They weren't trying to keep her, they just didn't want to lose her dowry. Even though her family wasn't wealthy, she had 3 loving older brothers, who managed to put together 3 large chests of dowry for her wedding. But after 7 years of marriage, those 3 chests had been stolen down to just half a box. As the woman was lost in thought, her husband suddenly came home with the sister-in-law in his arms, and the woman immediately noticed the earrings on her ears.